Hello and welcome to the Sidebar, presented by True Crime News, taking you inside the courtrooms of high-profile and notorious cases from across the country. I am your host, Joshua Ritter. I'm a criminal defense lawyer based in Los Angeles and previously an LA County prosecutor for a decade. You can find me on all social media at Joshua Ritter ESQ or at joshuaritter.com. We're recording this on Wednesday, September 18th, 2024. In this week's episode, a woman accused of stabbing a toddler in a supermarket parking lot will not face trial after a ruling of mental incompetence. Plus, a former ballerina convicted of shooting and killing her husband may have a chance at another trial after a judge agrees to interview the jury following claims of juror misconduct. But first, the arrest of rapper and entrepreneur Sean Diddy Combs after federal allegations claiming that the mogul was involved in sex trafficking. Today, we are very happy to be joined by Matt Murphy, a former deputy district attorney, now a criminal defense attorney, legal analyst, and now published author whose new book, The Book of Murder, is available wherever you get your books. Matt, welcome back.
So happy to be back.
Awesome. I am looking forward to this because I have been watching you on the news lately, and I know that you are kind of everybody's go-to analyst on the recent Diddy arrest. And we had actually talked about this on this show a while back when they first did the search of his home, the raids on his home in Los Angeles and Florida. And at the time, the question that everybody had was, is an arrest coming? And if one is coming, how quickly? So I'm glad to have you on the show to chat about that today. Let's catch everybody up on what's going on. The world comes crashing down on a once powerful hip-hop mogul after his arrest by federal agents at the Swanky Park Hyatt Hotel. Sean Diddy Combs had reportedly relocated to New York in anticipation of charges, but was apparently caught off guard by the apprehension, which came on the heels of a sealed indictment. Combs has been the target of multiple lawsuits since November of last year, alleging sexual misconduct and assault. Then the rapper's homes in Miami and Los Angeles were raided back in March, but little public information has been made available since that time until now. On Tuesday, prosecutors announced that Combs is facing charges of racketeering, sex trafficking, and transportation to engage in prostitution. It is alleged that Diddy used his power and influence to host what he called freak-offs, in which he would coerce participants into sexual acts which he planned and recorded. Combs has pleaded not guilty, but will remain behind bars after bond was denied on Tuesday afternoon. His defense attorneys are fighting to appeal the bond ruling, claiming that Combs is an innocent man with nothing to hide, and he looks forward to clearing his name in court. All right, Matt, explain for listeners, if you can, just kind of how monumental this is. I mean, Diddy is looking at life in prison for these charges, correct?
Two of the three independently carry life in prison, federal prison too, which is also no joke. So this is, talk about a fall from grace, Josh. This is really something. Now, when we last spoke about this, they had served the warrants. And if you recall, we were saying, people were like, oh, an indictment is imminent. And you and I both, I think, said, no, they're going to take their time and methodically go through every single communication device that exists, every cell phone, every computer, and they're gonna methodically go through this and take their time, and that's what they did. So this is also, I think that it was after our last interview where that video of Cassie Ventura got leaked of the hotel, and I think I speak for, and this is more from sort of a fan perspective. It's like I kind of went through the same process with OJ and with Bill Cosby. Like, you don't want to believe it, you don't want to believe it. And I didn't want to believe that this was true. And there were some civil suits and people were seeking money. Boy, and then we all saw that video in the hotel in LA, and it was like, oof, that looks really bad. So that's corroborative evidence that will certainly be admissible one way or another in his federal trial. And it's incredibly damning. I mean, that's a brutal tape where he comes out of the room in a towel and proceeds to violently beat and kick his former girlfriend, Cassie Ventura.
Yeah, I agree with you. It is funny that, there's something about these men in positions of wealth and power where when these allegations start to come out, they always make the claim of this is a money grab. This is somebody just trying to fleece me for some cash. There's nothing to this. And sometimes there seems to be some momentum behind those arguments. You kind of go, oh, well, yeah, these allegations are from 30 something years ago, and maybe somebody's looking for a payday or something like that. But you're absolutely right. When that video came out, it turned the entire tide and his attitude, because he was very much in publicly saying there's nothing to any of this. And then he starts making apology videos when that thing comes out, which brings me to my question is that you see a lot of people kind of have this cynicism, and maybe it's earned, that, oh, this is another rich guy. He's likely going to get away with this. This is federal charges here. Is this something he's going to be able to kind of buy his way out of with high-priced attorneys?
Well, look, he's, you and I are high-priced attorneys, Josh. And I'm looking at this. This would be an extremely difficult case to defend for no matter how good you are. And between the two of us, I don't know, we probably got 800 jury trials under our belts, or maybe not 800 trials total. Right. This is going to be a real tough one. Okay, because when they went in, remember those videos that we've all seen? They go into his house in, I think it was Pasadena, right? So his LA home, they go in with those Bearcats, those big military assault vehicles. It was Homeland Security going in with long guns and Bearcats, and what they came out of that house with, if you remember, were computers. Yeah. And when it comes to the federal government, FBI, and I'm sure Homeland Security as well, the FBI was involved in this. There is no organization on the planet that's better at forensically examining computers. So every email will be scoured, every text message. And, in one of those civil suits, very almost quietly under the radar, there are references to dozens and dozens of videotapes of these freak-offs. And, how much that shows, consenting adults is what the defense is going to argue versus people that have been trafficked against the Mann Act, and that's the law, which also kind of interesting. Human trafficking as a concept has really reached the public consciousness kind of in the last 10 years or so. The Mann Act is over 100 years old, my understanding, that federal statute. But what's really fascinating about these charges, Josh, I know you saw this too, these are RICO allegations. So this is most people think of mafia when you hear RICO. RICO basically is, the word they keep using in this indictment is enterprise. So what we're going to see, I think, when this trial goes, and I don't see much chance of a plea here, what we are going to see is we're going to see people within his organization who now have a criminal penological interest in cooperating that are going to turn on him. And I'm sure they've already got those lined up. And for your viewers, the way that works is it's called the witness bus or the defendant bus. When you have a conspiracy, every lawyer who's representing anybody that is in legal jeopardy it's like a race to see who can offer the most information and make the best deal for their client. And loyalty falls away real quick when somebody's looking at a lengthy prison sentence in federal prison. So, and as far as federal counts go, you hit the nail on the head. Just the narcotics and the firearms. Now, what they've done is they've alleged this is a 3-count charging document, but the internal allegations, including Schedule I narcotics, like the party drugs, along with firearms, if that by itself is submitted to a jury at some point in the future as a potential criminal charge, that by itself can earn him well over 10 years in federal prison. So, even the ancillary throwaway allegations in this, under the federal sentencing guidelines, are huge. They're absolutely huge sentence-wise. So this is going to be a sensational case.
No, it is dead serious. We are talking about, he's been denied bail. I know he's going to appeal that. The guidelines actually are presumptive of him being without bail. So we'll see if he's successful on that. But if he doesn't get the chance to bail himself out, I think he's seen the last day he is ever going to be out of custody. If like you said, even with the kind of afterthought charges here, he's looking at putting him away for a decade or more. But I'm so glad that you brought up the idea that this is being charged as racketeering or RICO, and the fact that it's being charged that way, and he's the only defendant that we know of at this time, like you said, absolutely signals they've spoken to everybody else in that enterprise, and everybody else is on team AUSA deciding that they're going to go ahead and flip on Diddy. And I think that one thing I know about federal charges is they do their homework, and it may have taken a long time in everybody's view from March until now. They have been working diligently to put together this case that by the time they brought this indictment, they know who they're indicting. By the time they brought this indictment, they have I believe, though I've seen not a shred of evidence, I believe it's probably a very rock solid case.
Well, yeah, you hit the nail on the head. And you've worked with the feds before. I have worked with the feds before as a prosecutor and as a defense lawyer. And if there's one thing about the U.S. Attorney's Office, they don't file anything unless they are 1,000% convinced that they got the goods. So, I mean, they're if anything, one of the frustrating things as a state prosecutor is you kind of bang your head against the wall at how timid they often can be. No offense to any feds that may be watching this, but come on, guys, you know what I'm talking about. They're very, very cautious. So when you see an indictment like this come down, you just know that behind the scenes they have a ton of evidence. And there were references to, so many different things. And that the arson is alleged to have taken place. I think there was a car that either caught on fire or blew up. Again, I haven't seen any of the evidence here either, just what I've read in the indictment and the charging documents so far. But that happened in Los Angeles County. And one thing that is interesting about this, Josh, is that we're seeing this trend right now in LA, which is our home, where the feds seem to be coming in more and more, like the Matthew Perry case. Those were all state charges or potential state charges. Like there are federal statutes that provided dual jurisdiction. But up until a few years ago, those would have been handled by the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office. When John Belushi had that hot shot, we remember that. Like the woman who gave him the drugs that killed him, she was prosecuted by the state, by LA County DA's office. We all know about the Michael Jackson case. His doctor was prosecuted by the LA DA's office. Matthew Perry, you had this drug ring operating essentially with impunity in LA until the feds came in. And that's a new thing in LA. And that's, I think, not to go down this rabbit hole, but that's a product of DA George Gascon. He's very eager to prosecute police officers, and it doesn't seem like they have much interest in prosecuting anybody else. So what we're seeing is this trend in Los Angeles County where crimes that are committed in LA are being pursued and prosecuted by the federal government instead. And that's a real shame for the residents of LA.
Yeah. It's a really great point. I hadn't pieced it together, but you're absolutely right. There does seem to be, even anecdotally of the way you've kind of drawn it out there, a trend toward that, which we did not see before. I remember, you're absolutely right. My time in the LA DA's office, we would routinely get these kind of scraps from the feds where they didn't want to touch it, and we looked at it and we go, this is a rock solid case, but they wouldn't want to go anywhere near it because they didn't have 42 different witnesses corroborating one event, and we're like, hey, this is better than most things I see as a DA. So you're absolutely right. They do not walk into anything without having every single I dotted and T crossed and several levels of corroboration. So yeah, his defense attorneys, Diddy's defense attorneys, are going to really have their hands full in what I think is going to be a remarkably serious case. In the meantime, though, let's leave it there for now. Plenty of that to talk about in the future, I'm sure.
Well, just because it's summer, it doesn't mean that you have to cut out all the carb-heavy foods that you love. Hero Bread reinvented the bread and the buns that make summer and fall great. And now you can try their sweet Hawaiian rolls for guilt-free summer sliders. Now, I have a personal favorite. That would be the tortillas. I gotta say, they're delicious, and I make my eggs with them practically every day. So Hero Bread has all of your favorites with no consequences and no compromises, with 0 to 1 gram of net carbs, 0 grams of sugar, and high fiber. Hero Bread is a really easy choice. Plus, they have something for every craving, including sliced bread loaves, buns, and did I mention those tortillas? So keep the carbs out of summer without compromising flavor with Hero Bread. Get 10% off your order at hero.co and use code TrueCrime at checkout. That's TrueCrime at hero.co.
Let's move instead to Cleveland, Ohio, where a woman accused of fatally stabbing a 3-year-old boy in a supermarket parking lot will not face a jury for the time being after she was deemed incompetent to stand trial. Bianca Ellis underwent a 20-day evaluation with the doctor ruling that she was unfit for trial, but adding that there was a potential route to restoring competency with proper treatment. Ellis's alleged attack on a mother and son left the woman injured and took the life of Julian Wood while he was sitting in a grocery cart. The suspect reportedly has a long history of mental health issues along with previous run-ins with the law. Now prosecutors will have to race against the clock as the statutory time frame to restore competency for trial expires after 1 year in Ohio. Matt, this case cannot get more nightmarish for parents or anyone, but just the idea of going to the grocery store and you've got your toddler in the cart like you see so many times, and some maniac comes out of nowhere and stabs that poor child to death. This case, I remember reading about it when it first happened, and I had to catch my breath. And now we're at trial, and now there's this issue of competency. And help listeners understand what that is, competency, how it's different from a plea of insanity, and maybe bring some comfort to the idea that that does not mean this person's getting out. Explain to us how that works.
So, tragically, Josh, and you know this too, this is a very common thing that you encounter when you work homicides, especially when you're exclusively doing homicides as a profession, as a prosecutor. This is a type of murder that unfortunately happens all the time. And in California, it's, this was in Ohio, but in California, it happens with increasing frequency with the mentally ill homeless population that we have. And essentially, there are, in California, it's called a 1368 proceeding. Ohio will have a different code number, but basically what happens is the defense lawyer will do what's called declaring a doubt. So it's one of the only things that they can do unilaterally, where they will come in and declare to the court, I cannot, my client is so mentally ill, they're incapable of assisting in their own defense. So they declare doubt, and the proceedings are suspended, and the court will then make a determination whether or not the person is competent to stand trial. So basically, it's not a get out of jail free card. What it does is it pauses the proceedings until competency can be restored. So in California, what happens, and this happens all too often, there'll be a horrific random murder that's committed. Then the mentally ill person will come in and they'll be shouting at the moon or whatever. Their lawyer will declare doubt. The court suspends proceedings. And then in California, or at least Southern California, they go to Patton State Mental Hospital, where they basically provide mental health services. Usually involves medicating them until they get some sort of psychotropic med that works. And then they're kind of restored back to a place where they can communicate properly with their lawyer. And then they'll certify them for the continuation of the criminal proceedings. So that's all it means at this point. Now, eventually, almost all of those cases will wind up at a point where that person will progress to trial. Then the issue becomes sanity. And depending on the jurisdiction, it's known as the McNaughton rule. So somebody can be mentally ill or crazy or a loony or whatever sort of euphemism we want to give them, but they are still not necessarily legally insane. So the McNaughton rule essentially says somebody is legally insane when they cannot understand the nature and quality of their acts. So the way we would explain that to juries is basically, if the devil pops up on somebody's shoulder due to mental illness and says that person over there is an alien invading the earth, they're not a real human, go kill them to save the earth. Their delusion is so severe that when they go and they kill that person, they do not understand the nature and quality of their acts. If the devil pops up on their shoulder and says, you're going to go to hell unless you kill that human being over there, then they still have the moral and legal responsibility to resist the urge. So they do understand that that's a human being. As deluded as they may be, they understand the nature and quality that they're killing a human being, regardless of what crazy motives they may have, and then they are legally sane. Okay, so we spent about, a month in law school at least going back and forth learning this as a concept, but it's really pretty simple. It's like Just because you're mentally ill does not mean you're legally insane. And the McNaughton rule is a very high standard. So she's got a long way to go. They're going to medicate her. They will almost certainly reach a point where they restore her to competency. The court will make a finding. Criminal proceedings will then start up again. And then they will wind up in front of a jury that will have to determine whether or not she's legally sane or legally insane.
Yeah. Wow. Really well done. That is the way you explained it. It does make what a lot of people think is a complicated rule sound fairly simple. It is about as complex as you explained it, though, that it really is the ability to appreciate, regardless of what delusions you've got going on in your head. Do you still appreciate the moral ramifications or legal ramifications of what you did? And we see this a lot of times in cases where they're claiming insanity. The prosecutors will point out, yeah, but you ran afterwards, didn't you? Or you hid the murder weapon, or you did something that indicates they knew what they did was wrong. Even if they believed they were, like you said, fighting the devil or something, they still understood that getting caught was a bad idea. But we're not even to that stage in this case. Right now, we're just at whether or not she is even competent to stand trial, which, as you pointed out, is even a far lower standard, because it's, can you sit there and do you understand who the judge is, who your attorney is, what's happening to you? And people can be competent and still be claiming insanity as a defense, correct?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So this is a multi-step process. And I mean, look, nobody, who's playing with a full deck, so to speak, commits a murder under any circumstance, unless they're like a mafia hitman, I guess, or maybe a gangster. But even then, everybody who kills another human being is a nut job, basically. So the question is that line of, in this case, competency, and then mental illness versus insanity. And juries don't like to find people legally insane. They do from time to time. But it's one of those things, and especially, boy, with this case just breaks your heart. These are the cases that keep you up at night as a prosecutor, or I'm sure as a parent. And I mean, this is just completely random, and it's a horrific thing. So nobody's going to want to let her out anytime soon. No. And yeah, I don't see this woman going anywhere, especially with that sort of level of danger.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that realizing the horrific nature of this and the violence involved, they're going to be very careful about how they handle this case. But we will continue to watch it and keep an eye on it, because we know how much our audience is interested in that case. Matt, before we jump into the last case that we're going to talk about this week, I do want to tell listeners about your brand new book. It's called The Book of Murder, A Prosecutor's Journey Through Love and Death. I received my copy yesterday. I was very excited to start it. And I got to tell you, I'm really enjoying it. It made me nostalgic for being a prosecutor. Just your opening kind of remarks about what it's like and the experience and your beginnings in the homicide unit in Orange County. It's incredibly well written. I think people will really enjoy it. But tell us a little bit about what is the book about? What brought you here to writing a book?
So, my plan when I became a DA was I wanted to. I was going to do 3 years, as a DA, and then go out and be a real lawyer in some civil firm and make, the big money and all that. And that turned into 26 years, and it becomes kind of almost an addiction. And what they don't tell you when you start is it only gets more interesting. And this may be a bad term to use, but it is so fascinating that it's fun. The longer you stay, the better the cops get, the more experienced the judges are, the more interesting the cases are. And in Orange County, the way it works is it's a vertical system. So when I rotated, I spent 4 years in sexual assault, and then I went into homicide. So I spent 21 of my 26 years in a vertical unit prosecuting sex crimes and then murders for 17 years in the homicide unit. So I was assigned the cities of Newport Beach, Costa Mesa, Laguna, and Irvine. So anytime we had a murder, I would roll out with my investigator, go to the scene, try to assist detectives with warrants or whatever they needed. And also you learn the case from the ground up. And then what would happen is the lead detective assigned to the case would follow it through after filing of charges and after I would meet with the family and take it all the way through. And that detective would sit next to me for every court proceeding and the whole trial all the way through sentencing. So it was a real team-based thing. And a lot of DA's offices don't do it that way. I think they all should. But it was just, they let us specialize in one specific area. So those are my cities. It was my patch of the county. And it's just fascinating. So there's different kinds of murders, like that horrific child abuse case we were just talking about, that poor kid in the store. That's a totally different kind of murder than, say, a gang murder, which is totally different than a conspiracy to kill people for money. And I did 13 cases in the homicide unit that technically qualify as serial killers. I did 6 true blue ones that I thought were worth, writing about. And one of them, I wrote a chapter on Rodney Alcala that I actually co-prosecuted with one of your former colleagues, Gina Satriano, who I love to death. And this guy was active in the 1970s. He's known as the dating game killer. And he was the real deal. Grew up in East LA, varsity letterman, handsome guy, charming, Mensa level genius IQ. And he was caught and convicted of kidnapping an 8-year-old and raping her in 1968. And he fled to New York. They bring him back. He gets prosecuted, goes to state prison with a life sentence under the old indeterminate sentencing schemes of the 70s, which was a revolving door of criminal justice. And it was horrific for the citizenry, right? He got paroled after 34 months and went on a spree where he murdered, depending on the estimate, about 100 people. And a lot of serial killers like to go after sex workers because the nature of that business, they wind up putting themselves in positions of vulnerability. And going all the way back to Jack the Ripper, that's like, if you really want to murder women and you get off on that, prostitutes, sex workers, whatever the term of the day is, they are typically in great danger of those guys. Rodney Alcala wasn't doing that. He was finding nice women and following them home. So his victims included a pediatric cancer nurse, a computer programmer, a legal secretary, and our Orange County victim, Robin Samso, who was 12 years old. So, I wanted to kind of educate the public a little bit about that. Like, what happens when you let one of these guys go? And in the middle of this incredible spree where he killed dozens and dozens of people that we know of it for sure, but up to 100 innocent women and kids, he went on the dating game and he won the dating game, and you see the charm. So Anna Kendrick, she's doing a movie called Woman of the Hour based on the Rodney Alcala case that their first trailer went up yesterday, same day that my book dropped. And she brought me in as a consultant on that movie. And I couldn't have been more impressed with her. That's coming out on Netflix soon. She was smart and engaging. And just like the rest of us, fascinated by the serial killer mindset. So I wrote a whole chapter on that. And I go through, gang cases and different kinds. And then I also was one of the 2 cold case deputies. So I had all these, I think, at least in my mind, fascinating stories that I wanted to share with people. And, and I wanted to educate the public on behalf of the victims, on behalf of the people that are affected by violent crime, but also all the hardworking forensic scientists and detectives and some of my colleagues that don't get the credit that I think they deserve. So I give sort of a behind the scenes thing. It's politically very neutral. It is, it's a memoir, and I intermix a bunch of kind of my own personal thoughts, like what goes through your head when you're watching the autopsy of a beautiful 23-year-old young woman who was shot as a decoy for some other horrific crime. Like you see some stuff that is just, as a prosecutor, that you can't unsee. And I really wanted to give credit for some of the heroes behind the scenes. So I decided to write the book, and came out yesterday. I still have no idea how the numbers are, but it's had some really nice reviews. And I hope people like it. It means a lot to me, Josh, that you like it, because you know the deal. You live the life. You know what it's like to be a prosecutor. So if it's ringing true to you, then that makes me feel good.
No, absolutely. Like I said, it's really well written, by the way. So congrats on that you have that talent amongst all your other talents. But it really does, I think, paint a wonderful job of what it was really like to be a prosecutor, from dealing with the politics to dealing with the the attitudes and conflict of personalities and trying to get, justice done. And then just the pressure that, you're dealing with these cases and issues of incredible magnitude. So do yourselves a favor, everyone. Check it out. It's called The Book of Murder, A Prosecutor's Journey Through Love and Death. It's out right now on Amazon. If you were a fan of true crime, you're going to absolutely love it. So thank you, Matt, for sharing that with us. And we hope that everybody checks it out. But in the meantime, let's move on to our very last case for today out of Manatee County, Florida. A new shocking development in the Black Swan murder case, as attorneys of the convicted ballerina will be interviewed by a judge to investigate potential juror misconduct. Ashley Benefield was convicted of the lesser charge of manslaughter after initially facing a count of second-degree murder for the fatal shooting of her husband, Doug Benefield. Prosecutors claimed that Benefield killed her husband to gain sole custody of the couple's daughter amid a nasty divorce. Benefield's defense is now seeking a new trial, alleging that one juror lied on a questionnaire while another juror snuck a flip phone into deliberations to feed information to media outlets. The judge was ultimately sympathetic with the defense's argument and will now interview all 6 jurors separately, with both sides submitting questions for the judge to ask. While Benefield waits for an update on her appeal, she's scheduled for sentencing on October 22nd and could face anywhere from 11 to 30 years behind bars. Matt, how incredibly frustrating is this as a prosecutor to go through all of that? You've done the high wire act. Everything went off as you hoped. You now have a conviction, and then all of a sudden you get these allegations of juror misconduct. Have you ever experienced anything like that? What is going through the prosecutors' heads right now?
No, I sure have. I had a new trial granted on a rape case I did that I wound up having to try that thing 3 times to finally convict the guy. So it is massively frustrating, but it's what it really is difficult for is the survivor family members, the people that loved the person who was murdered. And because if there's a new trial granted, you have to there's a saying in law enforcement, retrying a case is like putting on a wet bathing suit, and having to retry a case for a 3rd time is like putting on a wet, sandy bathing suit. It is incredibly difficult to retry a case. They'll do it if they have to. But the good news here is that it is not an easy thing to get a case reversed or a new trial granted for juror misconduct. What will happen is the judge has to take this step. The judge will interview the various jurors, probably together and perhaps individually, and ask this. One of the things that's interesting about this, I believe, they're going to have some foundational problems. There was a thing put on social media indicating that somebody may have done this, but it's unclear who wrote it. There's some foundational problems with at least that allegation. And we'll see how that goes. If all the jurors come in and say, have no idea what you're talking about, that didn't happen, and if somebody had their phone in their hand, it certainly didn't affect my verdict, I think the judge will deny this motion. But it's going to be interesting to see. It's a fact-driven thing.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right there. Apparently the allegation is that during a live stream of the trial, someone made a comment saying that they were communicating with one of the jurors, and this anonymous person apparently claimed some sort of relationship with one of the jurors, and it's that comment that was brought forward to the attention of the attorneys. But the person who made the comment is still unknown, and who the person was allegedly having contact with is also unknown. So it could be it's an absolute just fake and it goes nowhere. But more than anything, whatever it is, it's absolutely right what you said. They're going to question all the jurors. They will likely all say, we have no idea what you're talking about. And they will likely all say it didn't affect their verdict. And then it will be on to October 22nd and her sentencing, I think, without much of another hitch. Do you think, though, we're starting to see, just kind of generally in a larger perspective, allegations of juror misconduct seem to be happening more often, and especially this idea of them getting information from the outside world through their phones with social media, and even when they're not checking news. I get this all the time. I'm constantly getting news alerts, even when I'm not looking for it. If I was a sitting juror and that happened to be a case I'm dealing with, that might be a problem. Do you think that we're getting to the point where maybe not as far as sequestration, but, confiscating phones, we're going to see much more jurors perhaps being searched? You think we'll get that far, or are we not there yet?
Yeah, I don't think we're there quite yet, but I think that where we're going to see it is it's going to be on an individual basis with various judges. So when a judge gets burned, a lot of judges, especially the experienced ones, they will very politely tell the jury, look, if you do that, guess what happens? This whole thing gets flushed. That's juror misconduct. And you get a good judge that the jury is listening to. No juror wants to show up and do their jury duty, especially on a case as horrific as that one was. And they put their lives on hold. They come in. They really are the best that the communities have to offer, typically, because these are the people that show up for jury duty, right? And when they go in and they're selected, in my experience, most homicide juries tend to be a very sober, serious group. And nobody wants to do that and have some knucklehead on their panel screw it up for all of them and waste their time by making mistakes. So they're almost a self-policing group. So when we had a judge that was great at this, he'd say, "I'm going to treat you like adults." And let me tell you, those little devices that you have, those if anybody abuses that, then I've had judges say they would confiscate phones. That they kind of map out the disaster that happens if anybody violates that. And in my experience, jurors were pretty good about not doing that. But of course, social media is, it's increasingly accessible. And of course, it's a huge problem. You can't get information from an outside source as a deliberating juror and not completely infect the integrity of the process. So, it'll be interesting to see what happens here. I suspect, remember when the Murdoch case came in and the defense said, "Aha, we've got a new," and they had a press conference in the courthouse, and then that judge came down. The trial judge recused himself because it involved his clerk, the allegations, and a real hard-hitting, no-nonsense judge came down, I believe, from the South Carolina Supreme Court to do that hearing. And as soon as I saw her, I'm sure you had the same thought. It's like, that woman is taking no guff from anybody. And she basically just said, "Is this true? And if so, did it affect your verdict?" And every juror on that panel said, "Absolutely didn't happen, didn't affect my verdict." And she overruled it. And just like that, we had all the fanfare of, we've got an issue, and it turned into a big fat nothing in that case. So I for the victim's family on this, look, I'm a little biased here. She's been convicted, so the presumption of innocence is now gone. I really hope that this is one of those situations, that this is somebody provided this to the defense, they've properly raised it as an issue, and I hope it goes nowhere, because that is a horrific case. And what that woman has been convicted of doing is, it's the bread and butter of homicide. You see domestic violence situations like this all the time, and people in custody disputes lose their minds and commit murders often. And I mean, I've dealt with well over a dozen of these kind of similar, not as sensational as diabolical, but the day starts in family court and it ends with somebody dead. And so you see this all the time, especially in custody disputes. And hopefully the family doesn't have to go through that again. But the law is critical, and fairness to criminal defendants is something that we all have to respect. And hopefully that's the way it goes. But if they got to retry it, they'll retry it. And I think the evidence in this case it'll be just as strong the second time. So
yeah, I think you're right. I think the judge obviously can't ignore it. The judge is doing the right thing by making an inquiry, but I tend to agree with you that the chance of her getting an actual new trial out of this, unless somebody just says, "Yep, that was me. I was texting. I was using my phone," short of something like that, I don't think this is going to cause much trouble. But we will continue to watch it, continue to keep tabs on it, and keep you all updated. But in the meantime, Matt, thank you so much for coming on this week. Where can people find out more about you?
So Matt Murphy Law, at Matt Murphy Law on Instagram. There's also a bookofmurder.com website where we're doing regular updates. I'm going to be at Shakespeare and Company in New York City on Broadway this Friday at 6 o'clock. I fly to Indianapolis on Saturday for the Barnes & Noble in Indianapolis. Then I go to, I'm going to be in San Diego on Monday, the 23rd for a live event. I've got some stops in Salt Lake City, and we're sort of adding additional cities for to do some book signing, which is really fun. Everybody has been so nice so far. So at Matt Murphy Law is my Instagram handle. This is available on Amazon. For signed copies, there is pagesofbookstore.com, which is my local brick and mortar in Manhattan Beach that I've teamed up with. They're selling signed copies of the book. It's on Amazon. There's an Audible that came out yesterday that I narrated myself. Turns out I write in tongue twisters. But hopefully people will enjoy this book. I am no Ernest Hemingway, but I poured my heart and soul into it. So hopefully your viewers will like it.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think they will. I encourage everyone to check it out. That's awesome. I love this this concert tour you're doing for the book, and I look forward for a stop in Los Angeles so I could come by and say hi. In the meantime, I am your host, Josh Ritter. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Joshua Ritter ESQ. And if you want to hear more of my thoughts and coverage on even more true crime cases, please check out my brand new YouTube channel, Courtroom Confidential. In the meantime, you can always find our Sidebar episodes wherever you get your podcasts, and we want to hear from you. If you've got questions or comments you'd like us to address, tweet us your questions with the hashtag TCN Sidebar. And thank you for joining us at the True Crime News Sidebar.